The NL, National League, MLB favorite players. I'm Patrick here, co-hosting with Eric. Eric, how you doing this evening?
Oh, a little tired after last night, doing a 4.5 hour stream of pretty much just talking to yourself.
Uh,
And the people that we had here, checking on it. It gets tiring, and I'm still somewhat following the NFL draft as it goes on right now. It's 8 p.m. right now on the 24th, so we do still have the draft right now. It's in round two. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about our favorite players in the National League of the Major League Baseball. It should be
that is
exciting. I'm
true.
looking forward to this. We've been planning this video for a little bit as well.
Yep, this one's planned out as well. As you know, we did the AL video a couple days ago, and now we're gonna do the NL. So let's get right into it. First team we have in the NL East is the Atlanta Braves, which happens to be my top favorite team. So I'm gonna pretty much go out and you probably know who I'm gonna say. I'm gonna go ahead and say Freddie Freeman as my favorite player. He almost hit he finished 38 home runs last year, 121 RBIs, and was overall one of the steering players in the Braves organization, in my opinion. Especially throughout the regular season, they had other players that helped them, but I think Freeman definitely led them. In terms of going into the playoffs, and they ended up losing, obviously, I wouldn't say that was partly his fault, but he could have stepped up to the plate more, in my opinion, and do more than he already did. So that's who I'm going to say is my favorite for the Braves. What about you?
Oh, the Braves. So I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago when that Braves fan fell to his death at the stadium
That was like years
back in
ago.
like 2015.
Years.
Yeah, like 5 years ago.
Something like that.
So they actually just like a few hours ago, I saw this before we started the video, finally, agreed to settle on that lawsuit that the family filed. So good job, Braves. You let one of your fans die because you didn't have railing up.
Hey, the same thing happened in Texas Rangers' old stadium.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing though. That was unfortunate mistake by Josh Harrison throwing a baseball to a guy, and that kind of ruined his career too, to an extent. But my favorite Brave player, there's not a lot of guys I like in Atlanta, but my favorite Braves player is definitely Ender Inciarte, the outfielder. You know, he, I've said before, and you'll hear it again. I do like the Phillies. I like the Diamondbacks. Fact is, Ender Inciarte was a Diamondback. Phillies picked him in the Rule 5 draft a while ago, and then they let him go back to the Diamondbacks. Then the Diamondbacks traded him to the Braves as part of that Shelby Miller deal, and he's the prototypical guy that I like for an outfielder, a guy who hits for contact and a guy who has speed, and good defense. Jumping ahead now, we'll go to the probably most difficult team to have a favorite player on in Major League Baseball, and that is the Miami Marlins. My favorite Marlins player, I mean, in all honesty, I am a history major. Like if
We
it
are under the
could be
lights
done, I'd
this
be a
evening
history
as
major
we
in
get you set
college.
for another edition of
And
baseball on MLB
so
Network.
I was looking
Coming
at their
up, we've got
roster
a
a few
good
years ago, and
matchup
I
in
saw they had, or
store.
last year,
Let's
and
win
I
the
saw they had a
American
pitcher
League.
named Jordan Yamamoto, and there was a World War
Leading off
II
tonight for
general,
the
or
American
admiral, I
League,
should say, for the
the right fielder.
Japanese Imperial Army named Yamamoto. He was, instrumental in the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. But, I had recently watched some documentaries on Yamamoto, and I'm like, hey, Yamamoto, coincidence?
Pitch of the at-bat.
So, I started watching him, and yeah, he's a Marlins pitcher, so he's not that good. But he's respectable. I mean, he's the guy that if my team makes a move for him, as long as they're not giving up big prospects, I'm fine with it. He's a solid fifth, starting pitcher 5 on most teams. Now, I almost cheated and went with Derek Jeter as my favorite player because he is technically employed by the Marlins as the owner, but I wasn't going to do that. I'm interested to see who your favorite player is on the Marlins.
So just like you, obviously it's kind of hard to find a good player with a team that's kind of lacking. But I went with hopefully I spelled the last name right, Garrett Cooper.
Yep.
Um, Last season he did all right. It was about 15 home runs. Compared to the other players, that's sadly that's like average. And then 50, and then 50 RBIs, which of course isn't much at all. But I just went over. I just kind of this was a team that I kind of just picked the player that, in this terms of the stats from last year and year before, either improved or kind of about stayed the same. So pretty much that's what I said in terms of the Miami Marlins themselves. Yeah, of course they have to play better as a team, and obviously their attendance has to go up. And like you said, people like Derek Jeter being part of the co-owners, you know, you would think obviously he would do moves to make the attendance better and make the team more relevant in the MLB.
Right, right.
But we can definitely
Yeah.
put that as another topic and talk about that more.
You know, it's crazy to think of what if they had kept all these guys they traded for their rebuild.
That's true.
You know,
That's
it's
true.
crazy.
That would be better. But
By far.
let's keep moving on. So we go now to the New York Mets. And of course, I definitely got to go with Pete Alonso. It's definitely my favorite player from the Mets. It's also my cousin's favorite player because he's a Mets fan as well. Passed the 50 home run mark last year and got over 100 RBIs. So he's definitely an opinion of mine and most people's, the backbone for the organization at the moment. What about you? I'm curious to see who you choose from the Mets here.
There's a few guys I like on the Mets organization. At this point last year, I would have gone with Zach Wheeler. I like him a lot as a player. I also would, if this was 3 years ago, I would have gone with Matt Harvey. You know, from Connecticut. Good kid at that time, but you know they both moved on. Harvey's kind of irrelevant now. My favorite Mets player is definitely not the future PED user, Pete Alonso. It's going to be one of the more obscure players in their bullpen, Michael Wacha. I've always liked Wacha since he started with the Cardinals. Once he converted from starter to reliever because of a couple injuries that he'd been dealing with year after year. So you feel bad for the guy, and he's always putting forth a big effort, and I just respect him. I respect him as a player. I like him as a player. He's not young anymore, but he gets the job done. Now for the Phillies. So I don't want to repeat myself and go with Bryce Harper again. I did talk about him before. We did our favorite MLB teams video. Bryce Harper is my favorite Philly. I'm going to say that right now. I'm just going to talk about my second favorite Philly, Scott Kingery. You know, they picked him. They picked him out of college early on in the draft, and I remember watching a couple videos of his. I'm like, wow, this guy's good. So why I like him is because, yes, he's a prototypical guy that I like. He's got the speed, he has contact, he doesn't necessarily hit for power, but he plays elite defense. Here's the thing. He plays every position on the field except catcher and pitcher. You can put him anywhere in the outfield, anywhere in the infield. That's what he did last year. He played every position except catcher, pitcher, and first base. I love that versatility, especially if I'm a manager. They're going to try to cut down on it, but the fact is he's a good team player, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, who would your favorite Phillies player be?
Interesting you say that, because actually my number top one is actually Scott Kingery, low hole. Because I actually thought you would go with Bryce Harper. But actually, since you didn't go with Bryce Harper, I know you did in the other video, I'm going to take him this time. What a player he is, obviously, to many people, especially the Phillies fans now that he plays in Philadelphia. Coming from a team like the Washington Nationals that he played well with. Obviously, him now being in Philly is a lot to look forward to, and I know that, of course, the fan base has a lot of future hope in him as well. I mean, you can remember last season that walk-off home run that he hit was probably one of the top 3 highlights in the season. So definitely the heart of the Phillies right now, along with 2 or 3 other players. Kingery, I'd say, definitely is one of them. So yeah, moving on, we have the Washington Nationals. And this is an interesting player that I picked because, you'd probably be like, wow, you picked this guy out of all the other players that they have. They're actually decent players. So I picked Steven Strasburg.
I respect that pick.
Now, the pitcher, obviously. It's interesting. So I looked at his record from last season. His record was 18-6. Now, I remember when this guy broke into the league because that was one of the years that I had gone to the Atlanta Braves when they were playing in the old Turner Field. And the night before, they had played the Washington Nationals, and he made his debut in Atlanta, and it was a sellout crowd and everything. This guy was huge. Now, I wouldn't say he's necessarily dropped off the cliff in terms of his success, but I would definitely say he's not playing as good as he did in the beginning. I mean, we're talking about literally a decade ago, 11 years ago. But I think he definitely is a solid player still, and he can definitely he's definitely a good pitcher for the Nationals. What about you? What are your thoughts on the Nationals and players?
So I actually made a little list here of players. I went with my number 1 and my number 2 from each team here.
Yeah.
And I remember 2 guys. I wrote them both down, and then I remembered Strasburg's on the team, so I made him my 2B. And if you had picked my number 1 guy, I would have mentioned him and Juan Soto as my number 1. I would say it's a tie between the 2 of them.
Right.
But my favorite pitcher, my favorite player, I should say, on the team, Max Scherzer. Hall of Famer, no doubt. I don't know if you know this, but he does have 2 different colored eyes. So that's actually pretty cool. Like, you don't really know it. I didn't notice it until somebody pointed it out to me. They're like, oh yeah, Scherzer has 2 different colored eyes. He says he's fine. He can see perfectly. I respect Scherzer. It sounds like I'm a closet Tigers fan because here I am. This is like the 3rd or 4th former Tiger I'm talking about. But it was just a good player. I do like him as a player. Like I said, probably first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm happy he finally got that World Series ring that he should have gotten with Detroit, but rather than get the ring, the team just kind of fell apart. Scherzer's just a guy that I've come to respect. I remember when the Nationals signed him, and I'm like, ooh, that's a good signing. I wish it wasn't the Nationals. And also, I do like Patrick Corbin, so there's a lot of guys on the Nationals I like, specifically in their pitching rotation. Moving on to the NL Central, we have the Chicago Cubs, the second team in Chicago as far as most people are concerned. Obviously not. Everybody loves their Cubs. So I'm going to go with one of the most obscure players on in the team with my pick, and that's going to be center fielder Albert Almora Jr. I have no idea why I fell in love with him as a player. All I know is one time I saw Almora Jr., and he just started doing so good, and he always does something against the Phillies. Every time they play him in a series, Almora Jr. doesn't play every game. He plays like 2 of 3 games usually, and he typically hits like a big double or hits a homer against the Phillies every single time. And I came to respect him a lot as a player. He's a guy that, if I'm doing a MLB team on MLB The Show, I'm going to definitely try to target him. You can usually get him for cheap, and he's just a good serviceable player. How about yourself? I know that you are a fan of the Cubbies. Who would your favorite player be?
I went with Chris Bryant on this one. In terms of comparison to the other players, he did, I would say, slightly above average, computing 30 home runs, 77 RBIs. There's other players that I wanted to choose, but in my opinion, Chris Bryant was a player that I purposely picked out because, yeah, he's one of my favorite players for sure, but he's a player that I think definitely needs to up his game more, especially going forward in the next couple seasons. We'll see how that goes, because obviously the team is kind of shuffling players in and out, especially in the last couple seasons after they won the World Series back in 2016. So we'll see how that goes as we move on to the Cincinnati Reds. And I went for a name here that really isn't much relevant anymore. but he's kind of one of the players that just comes to mind when you kind of think of the Cincinnati Reds, in my opinion. And I went with Joey Votto. Now, honestly, his stats kind of surprised me because I haven't really been paying attention to the Reds the last few seasons at all, if any of the last 5 seasons, because they're kind of they're not really in the in my division of interest. But he only computed 15 home runs last season and not even 50 RBIs, which kind of surprised me. I know he's not young, very young. So going down the road, I don't know how his career is going to do. But yeah, I kind of just chose him because he's kind of, somebody asked me, oh, who's your favorite Cincinnati Reds player? Honestly, he's probably one of the only 2 I'll ever think of. So what about you? What are your thoughts on your favorite Red player?
That's interesting that you went with him. He's not even the best first baseman in Reds history. You know, you got to give that to the infamous Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle. Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. That's my speech on Pete Rose. So I'm going to go with, again, another former Tiger, in Nicholas Castellanos. He's a power-hitting right fielder. He just signed with them this offseason. He's kind of been weird these past couple years. He's been on a rebuilding team, and then he got traded to a team that wasn't doing that good, and he just kind of didn't seem to be in the game as much as he could have been. So I don't know if it's mental struggles or if there's something physically going up with him. But it's going to be something. I mean, I think Castellanos is going to rebound. I think that everybody letting him sit in free agency for as long as they did is going to hurt them. But we'll see. I do like Castellanos a lot. Now we're going to go to one of, in my viewpoints, the most obscure franchises in MLB, in the Major League Baseball. Like, I never think of this team. If I'm trying to list all 30 teams, I always forget this team. The Milwaukee Brewers. So I know the obvious choice for everyone is Christian Yelich, so I didn't want to go with Christian Yelich. I wanted to go with a different guy, and I'm going to go with the second baseman, Eric Sogart. I like the guy. I liked him when he was in Toronto a couple years ago, and I just, I like him because he's one of those players that wears sports glasses rather than contacts, and, he's got the first name Eric, so that gives him bonus points right there. He hits for power sometimes. He had a heck of a game. I was listening to a Toronto game. I forgot who they were playing earlier last season, 2019, and Sogart kept getting hits. I think he was like 3 for 4, 4 for 5, and there was like a homer, a triple, and a double, or something like that. He just kept getting hits, and I think they ended up walking him at some point. And it is what it is. I like a guy like that, and I'd be happy if Sogart, came to the Phillies. But I know he was a Brewer earlier on in his career. He's been a career journeyman, but still. How about you? Who would your favorite Brewer be?
Definitely got to go with the top one. You were talking about Christian Yelich. Honestly, let's be honest. All right, I'm not gonna. I know who your pick, the second base guy you just picked. Yeah, he's decent, but overall players, when I looked at some of their stats, honestly, to me it was kind of embarrassing.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But
100%.
Obviously Yelich has been on the team for a long time now, drafted back in 2010, and he's doing good. He's not doing great. I mean, 2-time All-Star. He won the NL MVP back in 2018, so it seemed like obviously since he's been drafted, he's definitely, the last 3 or 4 years, his pace of his game has definitely gone up more, which is why I would say he's one of my favorite players if I had to pick from the Brewers. So I predict that's just going to slowly keep going up, and he's going to get slowly better and better. And he's only 28 years old, so he still has a lot left in him. So I'm curious to see where that goes with him, and hopefully, he can actually take the franchise somewhere back into relevance. And my bad, he was drafted by Miami, not Milwaukee. But So, let's move on here. To the Pittsburgh Pirates. What the heck is there to say about the Pirates? Let's be honest here.
Yeah, seriously.
Honestly, I'm just gonna pull a name out of the hat here and say Josh Bell. For reasons, I'm sorry, I really don't have any. All right, this organization has sucked in terms of points, has sucked in terms of attendance. Like, they're letting the city down themselves existing in PNC Park. Let's be honest here, folks.
Ooh.
Like, to all you Pirates fans watching, I'm sorry. Like, they need to do something. Whether it's acquiring better players or getting a better ballpark. But this I don't know. This franchise kind of just upsets me thinking about it because it's such a. Honestly, you could almost say it's an embarrassment to the league in some points. But I just went with Josh Bell. He was the top 5 among his stats that I saw. What are your thoughts on this? Definitely underwhelming team here.
Oh, listen, if you're a Pirates fan, you should just jump ship and join the other Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's team, the Phillies.
No pun intended.
We got a lot of former Pirates on your team. Francisco Liriano is probably going to make the team. Josh Harrison's probably going to make the team. Obviously, Andrew McCutcheon's on the team. You got to just join. It's not like, there's not a rivalry because the Pirates don't have a team. They haven't had a team for the past decade when they let everybody down, They have the talent and they just can't do anything with it. And, to make things worse, you got fleeced in that Chris Archer deal. So, I can't even say anything positive about this organization. Other than the fact that you have some good, talented outfielders, and you've always had some good outfielders. I've always liked your outfielders. And I'm going to go with last year's rookie sensation, Brian Reynolds. He kind of came out of nowhere last year and played well. He wasn't the best player in the league. That's kind of tough to do, especially as a rookie. Like, he has great contact skills. He's a good fielder. There's really not too much more to say about him that I can say because I'm not looking at stats just because, I don't want to say, oh, this guy really sucks when I'm looking at stats and have my view be turned off. I just wanted to go by personal, preference on players. I'm not taking a shot at you, but I'm just saying, I wanted to go look at the names and say, oh, I love that guy. I didn't know he was here. Going to the last team in the division, the St. Louis Cardinals. So St. Louis is an interesting team. I was not expecting them to make the playoffs last year, let alone upset the Atlanta Braves. I remember the two of us here in Heartland Sports were talking, and I told him, I'm like, listen, I think, the Braves are going to lose game 1 or game 2, but they're going to win in 4. There's no way they're going to lose to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals just kept winning, and I'm like, what the? And then obviously they ended up losing to the Nationals, but it was a crazy ride. Anyway, for the Cardinals, I went with my favorite player on that team. I almost went with Mr. Bamboo and Brad Miller, but I went with Paul Goldschmidt, the former Diamondback first baseman. He's a guy that, one of the very few power hitters I mentioned in this video, or, in any video that I'm talking about my favorite athletes on teams. I'm not a fan of the power hitters. That's just me. But he's a good power hitter. He's not what he was a few years ago. He's kind of running down a little bit. I think he's 32 now, 31, 32. He still has some time left. But, it's going to be interesting to see if he can make the Hall of Fame. I hope he does. How about you? Who would your favorite player be on this team?
For this team, I definitely had to go with Yadier Molina. Now, obviously, Yadier Molina is catcher. But, honestly, as a player himself, he isn't the worst player at all, especially being with the Cardinals. He's got 1,900 plus hits, 156 home runs, he's getting close to the 1,000 RBI mark. But I mean, he is 37, so we'll have to see. He's been obviously in the league for some time now. He's been in 9 All-Star games, and of course won 2 World Series in '06 and '11 with 9 Golden Gloves. So this guy is definitely a solid player, and obviously since he's been on the Cardinals since '04, his career is winding down. But definitely, I would have to say one of my top 2 or 3 favorite players would be Yadier Molina.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say real quick while it's on my mind. One of my absolute favorite baseball moments is when Yadier Molina was playing, I think it was the Tampa Bay Rays or the Seattle Mariners, and his brother Jose Molina was on the other team. So he brought some like crackers or something. He ran out to home plate and he dropped them on home plate. And his brother got them, and everyone just starts laughing. I got a kick out of that when that happened. I don't know if you've seen that video, but if you haven't, or if any viewers haven't, I definitely would recommend checking that out. But sorry for stealing your thunder. Go ahead and continue.
No, that's right. I was pretty much done. But yeah, that's pretty definitely a well-rounded player, and wishing him the best in a couple years when he ends up retiring. But definitely still got a few more seasons in him. We'll see where that goes. So moving on now, obviously, we're down to the last 5 here, starting with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I went with an interesting player with this one. I chose David Peralta. Now this guy, being 32 years old, he's alright of a player. I kind of chose him more for his name familiarity. And he's been on the team for a decent amount of years now, at least 5 or 6 seasons now. He's got the Silver Slug Award. He's got a Golden Glove in the past two years. He's won both of those. He's one of the players that I see every now and then on the highlights, in terms of the Diamondbacks playing other teams. Is he a player that comes in clutch against big teams? That's questionable and not questionable sometimes. It depends. You look at the opponent that they face. But that's pretty much who I chose as a D-back player. What about you?
So I did talk about Jake Lamb and Archie Bradley in our favorite MLB video, favorite MLB teams video. So I'm going to go with my other guy, my third favorite player on that team, and that would be Mr. Luke Weaver. He's a young pitcher. He still has some stuff left in the tank. He really didn't play all that much last year. He suffered an injury. I think it was a forearm injury or shoulder injury early on, elbow injury in like May, early June, and he just didn't return, or if he did, it was like for 1 or 2 starts. Weaver's a guy who I like. I think he has a good, bright future ahead of him. And if I'm a fan of an NL West team, I'm a little afraid of Luke Weaver. But especially now with Madison Bumgarner, being on that team to mentor him a little bit. But only time will tell if Weaver can hit his potential. Moving on, we got the Colorado Rockies, who, the first World Series that I vividly remember watching games of would have been the '04 one, which was the Rockies versus the Red Sox. Needless to say, the Red Sox won that one. But either way, you knew it was going to be something big, because it was either going to be the Rockies' first title or the Red Sox breaking the curse of the Bambino. Anyway, my favorite Rockies player is one of the more obscure players on the team, in Kyle Freeland. He really, really did not look good last year, and he needs to turn it around this year. Otherwise, he's done. Like, his career's over. He just looked so bad this past season, but he's a solid pitcher. He has some good games. If you're a pitcher and you're pitching for Colorado, you're going to have a rough ERA. That's just a fact of life at this point. But he looked so bad. He got demoted last year. Life goes on with that, I guess. The thing is, can he stay healthy and can he bounce back this year? Probably not, but I hope he does. I do like him. I don't have a real reason to. It's just I don't want to talk about, yet another speedy, injury-prone outfielder. So I'll pass the mic over to you.
All right. So I definitely went with Nolan Arenado. I mean, just looking at this guy's player profile in general is just phenomenal of a career that he's had so far, not even being 30 yet. I mean, he's got numerous Golden Gloves, Silver Sluggers, led the league in home runs for 3 seasons, led the league in RBIs for 2 seasons, and of course he's a 5-time All-Star. Also, his name repetition is all over the league. I mean, any big MLB fan knows this guy's name. So that's pretty much kind of keep it plain and simple. That's definitely one that's my favorite guy. And moving on, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, LA Dodgers, I definitely had to go with Cody Bellinger. Was so close to 50 home runs last year with over 100 RBIs. And he definitely was a key player to help the team in the playoffs within the last couple seasons for sure. Looking forward to see what he can do in the coming seasons when the MLB resumes. What about you?
So we were talking at one point, and we got to a discussion. It's like, oh, I don't know much about this guy. Patrick said that. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll lecture you on him a little bit. So my favorite Dodger is from Connecticut, of course, like connection with that, and he fits my prototypical, outfielder mold, a guy who can play defense. He doesn't do defense as well as he used to. He has speed, again, not as much as he used to. He hits for contact. This guy hits for some more power. AJ Pollock. He's a guy, of course, the Arizona connection helps him too. I like what he does. He does pretty much everything well. He's a lower end 5-tool player, but he's a 5-tool player, sort of. He doesn't, he doesn't stay healthy. He keeps getting hurt, so that always hurts him. His value goes down, his value to the team goes down, and he's probably going to be a 4th or maybe even the 5th outfielder for the Dodgers this year after they traded for Mookie Betts. So we'll see how it goes, but I like Pollock, and I'd be more than happy if he signed with if he goes to the Phillies or any team that's not the Dodgers, because I don't really care for these big market teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees just getting all the good players like they keep doing in recent years. Now, speaking of throwing money at people, let's go with a small market team that's throwing money at people in the San Diego Padres, or if you prefer, the St. James Fathers, if you're one of those people. And there's so many exciting young players on this team that I completely forget that Manny Machado even exists most of the time. But I have to go with Fernando Tatis Jr. as my favorite player on the Padres. Young, super talented shortstop, has face of the franchise written on him. Face of the league, maybe, probably not, just because there's so many talented players right now. Like Acuna's getting his start still. Guerrero's got a leg up on him. Guerrero Jr., Tatis Jr., all these juniors, all their fathers, and played in the league for some point. And it's just crazy that we're at this point where it's a changing of the guard. All these old players are going, and all these young guys are coming in, and I think Tatis Jr. has a real chance to do it all. Do I think he can lead San Diego to a championship? Too early to tell. They need to get some more pitchers, and they need to solidify some positions first. They have a lot of older guys still, but there's definitely potential, and Tatis is a great guy to have as your cornerstone piece at shortstop. But how about yourself? Who would your favorite Padre be if you had to choose?
Oh, so I know the player I'm going to say is not going to be your biggest player fan. I know that for sure.
That's Manny Machado.
It's definitely Manny Machado.
That's fine.
It's interesting, because to me, if I compare him to other teams, I consider him like the Ryan Reeves of baseball. The guy is skillful, definitely. At least in my opinion. Definitely, I don't know about your opinion, but and of course he has a kind of a funny attitude and always a character when you see him in person. At least on the TV. I've never met him in person. But that'd be something I'd be interested in doing. But yeah, his stats are pretty solid. Obviously, he's been on numerous teams, coming from the Orioles and briefly on the Dodgers. Orioles being his longest tenure for about 6 seasons, and then recently coming to the Padres. But I'm really curious to see how he does with the Padres in general. Obviously, the Padres being another team that needs to play better for sure, and like you said, kind of just blows through money, and is not seeing any results. To be honest, that's going to leave the organization to believe that they're going to be successful in the standings in the next couple seasons, and I think Manny Machado is one of these people that can contribute to that. Of course, with Fernando Tatis Jr., the player you just mentioned. So that's who I chose for them. Going on to the last team, which is probably my favorite NLS team, definitely got the San Francisco Giants. So I went with a classic name here, a guy that helped them a lot in the 2012 playoffs. Definitely helped them in these recent World Series titles they got in the early 2010s. Buster Posey for sure. Obviously, his plays behind the plate were phenomenal, but his batting was phenomenal as well. Numerous walk-ins or walk-offs, and definitely a player that is, of course, the face of the organization, especially when they're going through a lot of changes right now on their roster. Honestly, if we were a couple seasons ago, I would have definitely said Tim Lincecum, because he was definitely a player that, as a pitcher, I thought was really phenomenal. But obviously over the years he's gone from team to team to team, and now I don't recall who he's with right. Do you remember who he's with right now? I do not remember. Tim Lincecum?
I think he's a free agent.
I might be free agent. I forget who he played last year. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if he played much, but anyways, yeah. So I definitely went with Buster Posey on that one. Curious to see who you have for your last pick here.
Yeah, so I just got a notification about the Eagles drafting a quarterback here in the second round, so I'm completely confused as to why they did that, so my mind's not exactly here 100%, but I will put this aside for a second here and go with my favorite Giant is going to be from formerly of the Phillies and Astros, Hunter Pence. Hunter Pence is a guy who, when the Phillies traded for him, it was kind of like a desperate move to keep their dynasty alive in the 2010s and early 2010s, and it didn't work. But Hunter Pence is a guy that they ended up trading to the Giants. He netted them a couple players, including Tommy Joseph, who was a catching prospect who really didn't turn into anything at all. But Hunter Pence is just a guy that he's always been a class act. He's always had a good attitude. He's just a good player, someone that I'd like to be around. Especially if I'm a player. At this point, he's been around the league for a solid, 13, 14 years or something like that. And it's just, he's a guy that I like to see, and I'd like to see him succeed. I don't think he has a championship, unfortunately, because all the teams that actually do, yes, he does. He did get one with the Giants, I think, towards the end of their weird random dynasty where they kept winning every other year. But he's a guy that a good power hitting right fielder. I think he'll be moved to an AL ballpark soon just so he can play DH again, because he was with the Rangers for a little bit. But we'll see. Yeah, that's the Giants, my favorite Giants player.
All right, so that wraps up our favorite NL team favorite players. As you can see, obviously we did put up a video a few days ago, or a recent video before this one, of the AL favorite team players. Appreciate you joining me, Eric, and kind of made some record time here for 39 minutes, but that's fine. So I appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. Many more videos coming out this coming week, including, of course, the New York Yankees history. and many more history videos regarding either baseball or other sports around the league, as well as other player profile videos, etc. Any last comments you gotta say, Eric, before we log off?
My last comment will be Braves are gonna falter this year. Go Phillies.
All right. Well, folks, he'll keep dreaming as we approach this upcoming MLB season. As we know, Braves are superior. Yeah, they kind of got choked in the playoffs, but it's all right. They at least made the playoffs.
Let's be real here. Let's be real here. No matter what, both our teams are gonna get steamrolled by the Dodgers.
All right. All on board. Screw the Dodgers. 2020.
I'm on board.
But all right. I appreciate you joining me, Eric, and we'll definitely look forward to more of these videos as we continue to grow the Heartland Sports channel.